Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today we're talking about 2021's Ghostbusters Afterlife, and my guests are from the sound team. Steve Morrow, production sound mixer. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Perry Robertson, supervising sound editor. Also, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Skid. Nice to be here.
And joining us for the first time, Will Files, re-recording mixer and supervising sound editor. Welcome to Below the Line.
Thanks, Skid. Nice to be here.
A warning for listeners, spoilers are possible during today's discussion. This movie has kind of an interesting history. You actually filmed it entirely pre-pandemic. In fact, I remember 2 years ago when we were talking about the Oscars, you guys were on, and I think we were talking about this that this was in post at the time. Give me a little more of a sense of what the schedule was for the release of this film.
Yeah, well, originally we filmed it, we finished filming in October 2019, and it was supposed to come out, I believe, the July of 2020. There was going to be reshoots to just additional photography that ended up getting pushed into the COVID, world, that we ended up shooting, I believe, September 2020 to fill in some story gaps and do a little bit of, post ADR and things like that. So that it got pushed, a year and a half, I think, from the scheduled release due to, COVID and the world not being able to see it in theaters. And Sony really wanted the audience to experience it in theaters. I think Jason also wanted that. So, yeah, that's where it pushed.
Yeah, and then Will got it and asked me to help, and that was I think we looked at it October, November of, where are we now, 2020, 19?
Yeah.
I don't even know where we were.
Isn't it? A lot's happened in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and then we worked on it up through May. Once COVID started, we actually kept working and made it up through 2020, and we made it up through pre-dubs and a little bit of the final, but then they wanted to record and use a full live orchestra to do the music, and they couldn't do that with COVID going, so we had to stop down. And to be honest with you, I don't know about you guys, but I think it made the movie better.
It definitely did, yeah.
We would have had to rush to get everything done by the July 10th thing. And so when they moved it back, it gave, I think, Jason a little bit of breathing room, and it gave Steve and the guys time to go back on set. Yeah, I think it was great that we had some time, or Jason had some time to look at the movie and do some additional stuff and fix a few things. And the visual effects, I think, definitely got better. I think he did a couple of little tweaks that actually made the movie a lot better. And not that it was bad in the first place, because I loved the story from the beginning, and I know we all did. But it gave us a chance to really slow down a little bit and think about the process. And Will, I know, had some chances to go back and really look at some other sound effects, and I think COVID actually was a good thing for this movie.
Yeah, I think the original schedule was very ambitious. They had a release date they were targeting, and they really wanted to get it out for that date. And I think it actually, it feels like a big summer movie. So in a lot of ways, I wish we could have made that original date, but circumstances being what they were, I actually think it was really good for the film that we had more time to work on it, and it wasn't just this crazy mad rush to the end. We really had a chance to try some stuff. That's my favorite version of the creative process, is when you have time to try and fail, because then you inevitably get to take bigger chances and bigger swings. And we definitely failed plenty on this one, and Jason wasn't shy about telling us. But that's actually how you get something really cool, is you get to try some wild ideas, and some of them stick.
Yeah, I would hate to do the Marshmallow Men in a really fast
Oh my god.
We would have killed each
The
other.
Marshmallow Man. I mean, that's something, Perry and I both had a fair amount of pain, and Chris certainly had a lot of pain dealing with those Marshmallow Men. That was the hardest nut to crack, actually, believe it or not. I mean, out of all these, big concepts that we had in the film, that one was the hardest one because it was like trying to come up with the, character voices for, 100 characters. And make them feel distinctive but similar, and really find the performance that Jason was happy with.
I think it's important to say, based on this, is that Jason, at least I've worked with him, for 15 plus years, and I think Jason has the movie in his head. Like, he knows exactly what it is, and it's everybody else's job to put it out and put it exactly how he imagined it. And sometimes, it's hard to understand what he's already imagined in his head, and it's hard to get it out, but he knows when it's not the correct thing, and then he knows when it's exactly right. But I think there's those moments where you go, okay, but he knows exactly what it is. He can't tell us in a way that we can get it until we've tried and failed a dozen times, right? And then he finally goes, yeah, that's it.
That's it. Yeah. And you have that wonderful moment when you all realize, like, okay, we found it. We found the vibe that that's correct. And then you try to apply that to everything else.
And so with these little marshmallows, that's interesting because it's a throwback, but then an expansion of the original in the sense it's not just one large marshmallow. They are countless. And that's just, Steve, what's the set aspect of filming that, by the way, when it's going to be heavy visual effects, but there's a lot of little on the set interactions with actual people that need to be captured?
The biggest goal in Jason's attempt to make this movie was, let's do everything as practical as possible. So like the terror dogs were practical, unless they're running around, right? The sets were these giant set pieces. I'm sending you pictures of those. I mean, these are really cool looking sets and experiences. Obviously, the little marshmallow men are just, we're going to do those in CGI, but they had little models of what they look like, so everybody could have kind of understand. And when Paul Rudd's character sees them the first time in Walmart and they're popping through the bag, there's an effects person doing a little push through the bag. So he wanted it to feel like the original movies where you had to do everything practical. There wasn't a ton of visual effects back then, and so he didn't want to do that on this one. So it's kind of fun, to watch that and to be part of, just getting to see, a Roomba driving down the aisle, and they'll add some things on top of it. I mean, those are the fun things about filming a movie like this, where you get to really see it versus just imagine it's going to happen.
Well, doesn't it help you guys and the actors, like when you're in the cave or whatever, that you're on an actual set instead of just being on a green screen trying to imagine what's there? I mean, I would think it's better for you guys and for the actors.
I think it's better for everybody. You just get to really see what it is. Also, it's just the magic of making a movie. All of a sudden, it's, you're not on a blue screen set where you're just going, okay, this will be great later. It's, you walk into a stage and you go, holy crap. They have spent some time and effort making this look as cool as this is going to look for the audience. And I think that comes across in the movie, especially with kids. You want them to be, that the actors in the movie are, a lot of them are kids and they're all great actors, but there's just an amazement. I'll give you an example. When they fired the, when they find Muncher for the first time in the abandoned, factory, and it's Phoebe and Podcast firing that gun, and sparks are flying and flames are going, and we got the shot and we cut for the first time. The kids just erupted like, oh my gosh, did you guys see that? This is the most amazing thing. And honestly, like, the adults in the room were like, oh yeah, that was cool. But you got to see it from a perspective of kids, because we've done it 1,000 times, right? We've done it over our careers and we've blown stuff up, and it is cool, but you forget sometimes how cool that really is. This is what we do for a job. So, just to get to see it through the kids' eyes were just really fun throughout the whole filming process, because they would be, amazed all the time when we slathered Podcast with the marshmallow at the end of the movie. It's like, this is a kid. He's just like, he's so thrilled and so excited to be just smothered in marshmallow. I mean, this is That's the joy of making this movie.
Well, in talking about the Marshmallow Men, that's a throwback to the original film. Anyone who's seen the film knows there's a lot of ties back, and that there is an intention to have this movie relate very closely to the original series. But I think that's also true, and I want to hear more from you guys about some of the iconic Ghostbusters sounds that I also noticed in this film reminded me of the sound effects and the music and just the entire sort of sound landscape from the original movies as well.
I'll start from the production side of it. I think Will and his team sent me sound effects to use on set, and that was to help the kids know when the proton pack was firing, when it was turning on. We used the original sounds that Will was able to find. He can tell you how he found it, but we used it on set just for the kids' sake, which also helped Jason, and the camera department know when the gun was firing, when it wasn't. And that was just kind of a fun thing for us to be able to play back and just kind of watch the kids and see when they would flip the switch, and we would try to time it the best we could to give everybody the full vibe of when it was going on. And Will, where did you find those?
Well, luckily, someone along the line in the last 40 years has done a pretty good job of researching and finding all these old materials and archiving them in the Columbia Sony archives. And we did a deep dive with the archivists over there, and they turned up all this cool material, including the original 32 track score recording. So all the different mics and raw elements and overdubs for the score. That was incredible. And we sent that to Rob Simonson, the composer. And then on our side, we dug up all the stems, so the dialogue, the music, the sound effect stems from the original two films. And then we also dug up the sound design work tapes from the original film. So the original sound designer was a guy named Richard Beggs. And back in '84, of course, everything was done on tape. So there was lots of outtakes on these tapes of sort of alternate versions of the sounds that we know. So that was really cool because we were trying to create this world with this film where everything sounded familiar and yet not just wanting to use the same sounds over and over again. And, we also had the pack that had, been in a barn for the last 30 years. It doesn't, nothing is, Ecto is not in the kind of shape it used to be in and all that stuff. So, and we also had some new tech that we had to develop. And also we had all the old machines and stuff were doing things that they didn't do in the original film. We had to extend the world quite a bit. So it was a really amazing thing to find all this source material, which had the takes that and love. It's like almost like when you listen to alternate takes of a song that really well, and you go, well, that's the song, but it doesn't have those little things in it that I know. So it was really cool to hear almost like his exploration process. And then, oh, that's the one that Ivan picked there. Okay, that's the one that we know. But then we were able to mine all kinds of useful stuff out of these alternate takes and then turn them into all kinds of new material. We've got like the trap field, there's like 100 traps going off at the same time. We've got, we've never been as close as we are visually to the pack itself. Jason designed this beautiful moment in the middle of the movie where she turns on the pack for the first time after she fixes it. And Jason, the camera lingers over the machine in this way that's very tender almost, and it's very intimate. And that was the most fun single moment of sound design for us to do. In fact, that was the first big thing we did for him. And that was the kind of thing where having access to all this old material and outtakes was super useful because we were able to make new sounds out of these old sounds. We were able to take isolated elements and run them through particle systems and Dopplerize them and things like that to make okay, we want it to sound like the stream, that we know from the film, but what does that sound like when we're behind the actual device and we see it spinning around, and okay, how can we suggest that it's the same kind of energy and technology that's behind this plate as what's coming out of the stream in the other films. So that was a really fun challenge to try to figure out how to make it seem familiar yet fresh, and also old and crappy, and that it barely works, you know.
And the fun thing is, on set, we do the opposite. Ben Eady made that pack, right? And the thing is spinning inside. Well, of course, that thing is noisy, right? It's not going to sound like the original pack. So we're lingering behind it. And, on set, we're like, oh my gosh, this thing is so noisy. And the kids are next to it. How do we turn it off as soon as we don't see it? Because we have to protect the dialogue, and we know we got to replace it. So we're sitting there going, "Oh God, this thing is so noisy, Jason. Why would you want to do that?" Obviously we're concerned about the dialogue, but it's a beautiful thing, and the effects guys were able to obviously turn it off when we don't see it. But it was one of those things where it's like, please don't shoot this with two cameras with the dialogue on the kids and a close up on the pack, because then we're stuck with it. But yeah, I mean, that's our selfish need for sound.
And you know what's funny, Steve, is we actually ended up using a couple of those practical sounds in that sequence. Like there's a sound at the very end when she finishes firing that you hear it, you hear the guy, you hear it turn off basically, and you hear it wind down, and it's a little squeaky almost. It goes, and of course we added a bunch of other stuff there, but there was something to that it just had a flavor of reality and authenticity that Jason always loves so much. So I left it in, and
that's me begging Ben, please, when she's done firing, can you turn it off?
Which is great, because it gives it this. You've got this moment of like this big pop of energy, and then at the end, it's kind of like an exhale. The machine is kind of like, I'm tired, and so it really worked out.
And also, just having to be honest with podcast flicking the Polaroid, right? It's almost like, how do you know how a Polaroid works? All right, I gotta tell you a story. When he's riding in the car with Gruberson and the windshield is blown out after they open the trap for the first time, right? And Podcast is sitting there just thrilled that the car has exploded. Before we do the scene, Jason asks, should we have the windows down or up? Let's try it down, and Podcast is looking around and he goes, where's the switch? And they explained to him that it's a crank. And he goes, what do you mean a crank? He's young enough to be that he's never been in a car without electric windows. And we're tell him how to do it with the crank. And his eyes are just like, this is incredible. You crank down a window?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was a moment where everybody on set just felt old. Didn't matter how old you were, we all felt old.
I got to go to the Comic-Con in New York. That's where they basically premiered it. They surprised everybody there, but it was a room with 3,000 people in it, and they thought they were just coming to hear talk with Jason, Ivan, and the cast. And at the end, Jason showed up and came out and he goes, well, my dad and I think it's been long enough. We're going to show this to you guys now. And the place went totally nuts after they watched it. I mean, they'd go past one of the signs or something when they're driving up to the house, and they'd start whispering to each other. And I'm like, what are these people seeing that I didn't even, I've worked on this thing for 2 years. I have no idea what they're seeing, but they're such nuts. They remember a couple of frames from, 1984 or whatever. But anyway, after we were done, these press people sitting behind me found out that I had worked on the movie, and they too came up and go, did you guys use the actual sounds? And I said, oh yeah.
That's so cool, man. I wish I could have been there.
I know.
I do have a story from set talking about kind of the original, experience, and Ivan Reitman. It was just kind of this fun moment. At the beginning of the movie, you have, I'll try not to spoil it, even though I'm pretty sure everybody's seen it, but you have the ecto blasting out of the mine and blowing through gates. Right. And it's like a locked mine, and he blows through these gates. Well, the Ecto that we had was a souped up, Cadillac V8 full. I mean, these guys did a great job. And this is a heavy, heavy car, right? I mean, this thing weighs, 8,000 pounds and was blown through suspension and all sorts of stuff throughout the whole shoot, because they would rip in this thing around the corner, which, in the original movie, back in the 80s, they didn't quite have that beefy suspension or engine. In fact, the story was on set, Ivan was saying, this thing would barely go over 40 miles an hour. And we ripped, the stunt guy blew through those gates at 70 or 80 miles an hour and just ripped past us. And the way that we filmed it was, the entire crew was safe, but we were all on the side of the road, and because it was a giant field and a ditch, between us and the rest of the world. So the stunt guy rips past it and just rips past the entire crew. And we cut, and Ivan said, "That is the fastest I have ever seen that car go." When we made it in our day, it couldn't go past 35 and barely turned a corner. It was just like, that's not your father's. And he literally said, "This is not your father's Ecto-1." I just thought it was great. And Ivan and Jason, everybody had a great time, laughing about it and just having a good time with it. And it's a very sweet thing that Ivan was there as much as he was, and on set, and Jason would, they would collaborate so tightly to make sure that this movie did live up to, Ivan's original dream and original idea, because it was such a special family film for both of them. And so I think it was important all the way down to sound, that it came out the right way. It was a very much a labor of love. Everybody involved understood that this was like an ode to the 80s, to make sure that it lived up to that.
Yeah. And on the other side, we actually talked to Jason, when we were mixing about it, and obviously he said the hardest thing was sitting there with his father right next to him directing. How do you do that for 3 or 4 months, whatever it is, But I think the sweetest thing for us was we did a final playback, and Ivan was there, and when we were done, he was in tears. It was special, man. It was awesome for all of us to be part of, for sure.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. That was really an incredible moment.
Yeah, this is when you're talking about making a Ghostbusters Afterlife movie, which is basically Ghostbusters 3, I think everybody knows that it's Ivan Reitman directed, the originals, and Jason Reitman, his son, is going to direct this one, which is, 30 years later. And to be honest, most of the crew, the core on-set crew, have worked with both his dad and his son. I've done most of his son's films, and I did Draft Day with his dad. And this is a big family affair. You have to, especially a film family, you have to, what's on the line. Everybody's there to make the best movie possible. And all the fans, are going to kill you if you do it wrong, and so it's like, not let alone the pressure on set to do it right, and the pressure just to do it right for the fans, because this is really a fan driven movie. And there's a ton of things in there for the fans. You can watch it 10 times and find something new each time. And so it was important, for everybody to get it right, especially for Ivan to feel like we're treating it with the respect that, that it deserves after 30 years. And I think that was important to everybody. Everybody knew it while we're making the movie. So it was fun to watch. And the joy that Ivan got out of certain things on set, like the Ecto, being able to go above 40 was, it was fun. It was fun to watch. And Jason, I knew, felt the pressure, because who wouldn't feel pressure from your dad, watching over your shoulder something that he created 30 years ago and that you're trying to honor. So, but it was a lot of fun to make this movie with both of them.
I'd be remiss not to mention the exchange between Phoebe, who's played by McKenna Grace, and she's talking to Podcast, who we mentioned a couple of times, Steve being on set, who's played by Logan Kim, and she asks him, "Why do people call you Podcast?" And he answers, "I call myself Podcast because of my podcast." And I'm sorry he got there first. I wish I had thought of that. But I guess I'm stuck with Skid. Guys, it's been great having you on the show today. We're going to call it a wrap. Thanks so much for being here and sharing these stories.
Thank you. Below the line.
Yeah.
Listeners, as I've mentioned before, these shorter episodes are an experiment, and I'll be grateful for your feedback. If you want to get in touch with me or just learn about the podcast, please visit our website, belowtheline, oneword.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll find contact info, past episodes, and links to all of our social media. Guys, going around the table, what are you working on now that will next see your work? Steve, what's up with you?
I did the Olivia Wilde movie, Don't Worry, Darling, and then Damien Chazelle movie. It'll be out at Christmas. I think Olivia's movie is out in September. Damien's movie will be out in around Christmas, and that one is called Babylon.
Perry?
I am working on a new, a limited series called The Offer, which is basically the stories of how The Godfather got made, which I have to say is one of the most fascinating things I've worked on in a long time. It's really fun.
And Will, what about you?
Well, I most recently finished The Batman, which is out now. And right now I'm working on the next season of Stranger Things, which is a hell of a lot of fun. And actually right across the hall from Perry, so I get to see Perry all the time.
Well, all of these are teasers for future episodes, so guys, plan on coming back. My shout-outs are the regular bunch. Curtis Vai, thank you for our music. John Wan, thank you for our logo. And to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.
That's always the best way to get something really cool is if you get to. Sorry, hold on.
Is that you? Okay. I'm doing separate tracks now, so depending on where it's coming from, maybe I can fix it. But if it's on your track,
it's on my track.
I'm not. Yeah, I could send it back to you, and you could run it through, the levels and things, and just clean it up. But I don't think I can do that on my own.
Well, we've got some good software for that. Perry can work with it.